He said that one day he heard something that a human was never meant to hear, not in a dream, not in delirium, on an instrument. It happened in 1899, Colorado Springs, a tower, antennas, a thunderstorm, lightning in the sky, the ground trembling under his feet. Tesla stood alone in the laboratory. He was catching storm waves and suddenly heard a signal. Not noise, not interference, a rhythm, short impulses, a pause, impulses again, too precise to be a coincidence, too intelligent to be nature. He turned off the power, the signal remained. He changed the frequency, the rhythm followed him. Tesla froze. On his face, no fear, astonishment. "Someone is speaking," he whispered. Later he would write, "I heard a mind using energy as language. We are not alone." A few days later, he invited his friend, the writer Mark Twain, into the laboratory. "Listen, Sam, this is not just electricity." "Oh, come on, Nikola," Twain smiled. "You just haven't slept for 2 days." "No, it's someone. I don't know who, but they are answering." "Who they?" "Those who live in the light." Twain looked at the instrument. Pulsating lamps, a faint crackle. "Maybe it's just lightning playing with your wires." Tesla raised his eyes. "Then the lightning thinks." They stood in silence. The room grew strangely still. Even the air seemed to stop. The lamps flickered once, twice, and lit up without power. Twain recoiled. "What the devil?" "Not the devil," Tesla replied. "Intelligence." He walked to the window. Outside, the storm raged, but inside it was bright, as if the thunder itself shone from within. Tesla spoke slowly, almost in a whisper. "We think energy is power. But what if it is consciousness? What if everything around us is alive?" Twain looked at his friend, not knowing what to say. He saw before him a man who had either gone mad or touched something beyond ordinary understanding. "And what are you going to do?" he finally asked. "Listen," Tesla answered. "And if it's dangerous, then we'll find out what the universe fears." Later, Twain wrote in a letter, "He spoke of light as a living being, and that night it seemed to me that this light truly listened to us." After that conversation, Tesla changed. He almost never left the laboratory. For weeks he sat before the antennas as if waiting for an answer. Each time the signal returned, he felt that the mind on the other side was observing, not with evil, not with good, simply studying. He began recording everything, rhythms, pauses, frequencies, and one day he realized the signal was built like a code, not random waves, a message. For whom? For him. He understood. This knowledge did not belong to Earth, and if he could decipher it, humanity would take a step beyond its own nature. He did not yet know that this would be the beginning of a contact that would change everything he believed in. After that night, Tesla remained silent for a long time. He told no one what he had heard in the laboratory. Only in his diary did he write, "The signal returns. It is persistent, like a mind." Every evening he turned on the receivers, adjusted the frequencies, and once again recorded the same impulses, short, long, repeating in the exact same rhythm. It was not a coincidence, not noise. Everything was too precise, as if someone truly tried to make contact. He noticed that the signal often appeared at the same time, around midnight, as if they knew when he was listening. Tesla did not fantasize. He checked everything, the instruments, the wires, the power sources. Everything worked perfectly, but the signal came from where there should have been nothing. One day, he made a note in his journal. "Light is not merely a phenomenon. It is a carrier of consciousness." We were wrong. Energy is not power, but a form of mind. His colleagues laughed, but Tesla spoke calmly. If energy can transmit sound, image, thought, then the universe itself already knows how to think. He was not looking for aliens. He was searching for the structure of consciousness within nature itself, and for him, the signal was proof. A few weeks later, Mark Twain came to the laboratory again. "Nikola, are you still catching your lightning?" Twain smirked. "No, Sam. Now I listen to silence." Silence? Yes. Sometimes it speaks louder than any sound. Twain laughed. You're back to your intelligent waves, then? Not intelligent, Tesla corrected. Intelligent by nature. He showed his friend the graphs, straight lines of oscillations, repeating with accuracy to a fraction of a second. Nature does not create such order by chance, said Tesla. That means there is a source somewhere. Not a radio station, not a star, but something that thinks. Twain looked at him closely. And what does it want? I think nothing. It simply exists, observes. For a moment the room fell silent. Only the lamps crackled with tension. Tesla spoke calmly, as always, but there was something new in his voice. A certainty, as if he already knew the answer. We believe consciousness is born in the brain, but perhaps the brain is only a receiver, and thought itself, he paused, exists in space, like a radio wave. Twain pondered. You mean to say that all living things are connected to one network? Exactly. And perhaps that network is God. Twain smirked but did not argue. He felt that behind these words was not madness, but logic, frightening, yet beautiful. Later Tesla would write, I do not hear their voice. I feel the direction of thought. It comes like a flash of light, and brings knowledge without explanation. From that moment, his discoveries followed one after another. He created devices no one else understood, transmitted energy without wires, sent current through the air, making lamps glow at a distance. Journalists called it a miracle. He simply said, it's not a miracle. It's a law we have not yet discovered. Sometimes at night he returned to the laboratory, turned on the instruments, and listened. The signal still came. The same rhythm, the same intervals, but now it no longer caused unease. Tesla smiled and quietly spoke into the emptiness. I hear you. Then he made a note. Contact stable, source, beyond known space. Information comes through a field of light. He did not consider it mysticism. He considered it the science of the future. Winter of 1900. The laboratory in Colorado Springs already resembled a spaceship. Coils, antennas, copper spheres, glowing arcs. Everything around Tesla seemed to breathe with energy. He stood among the instruments like a conductor before an invisible orchestra. This time, he was not just listening. He was responding. He had built a circuit that could not only receive, but also send a signal into the ether. And one night, when the air was dry and still, he said quietly, If you truly hear me, show it. The answer did not come immediately. At first, a faint crackle in the coils, then light, not blinding but soft even, as if the air itself began to glow. Tesla froze. It seemed to him that space had become transparent. He saw lines, endless threads of light connecting all living things, and he realized what we call electricity was only a part of that network. In a moment, images flared before his eyes, cities illuminated without wires, people speaking across distances, unseen to one another, machines moving without fuel, a world filled with light. He stood motionless, afraid to breathe. It was the future, not in 100, not in 1,000 years, real, possible. But then the visions changed. The same light, blinding, destructive. Explosions, cities in flames, weapons powered by that same energy, the light that gives life, turning into fire. And in his mind, he heard, not a voice, not words, but a thought that came from beyond. Energy is neither good nor evil. It only shows who you are. Tesla stepped back, his heart beating faster. He understood. This was not mere knowledge. It was a warning. The next day he wrote in his diary, They showed me two paths. One leads to light, the other to the abyss. The choice belongs to man. He told no one about it, but his attitude toward inventions changed. He no longer spoke of free energy for all. Now he understood. Not everyone was ready to receive it. Mark Twain visited him again. Nikola, you look tired. I've seen what will be, Sam. What is it? A world where light becomes a weapon. Then don't give them that light. Tesla smiled. It can't be withheld. It's already here. Twain fell silent. He realized arguing was pointless. Before him sat a man who had seen farther than anyone alive. Tesla continued. I thought I was speaking with beings, but now I think differently. Perhaps it is the universe itself that speaks to me. Through energy, through laws, through light. Twain shook his head. And if all this is only your imagination? Tesla calmly replied, then imagination is the most powerful means of communication in the universe. They both laughed, but the laughter quickly faded. Tesla looked thoughtfully at his instruments. There was no madness in his eyes, only calm certainty. Sam, he said quietly, one day humanity will hear them itself. And then what? Then the test will begin. Later he would write, light is a mirror. It reflects not form, but essence. When we can look into it, we will know who we are. That thought never left him again. He understood. Those he called the minds of light were not teaching. They were testing. Testing whether humanity could avoid destroying what it had been given. Years passed. The world was changing faster than he could record formulas. Radio, current, the first transformers. Everything he had once seen in his visions now appeared on the streets of cities, but along with the light came the shadow. Inventions born from his ideas began to be used for weapons, for power, for control. Newspapers wrote about the genius who illuminated the earth. He read it with bitterness. They don't understand, he once told Twain. What exactly? Twain asked. Light is not a blessing by itself. If there is darkness inside a man, he will turn light into darkness. Twain was silent. He had already seen the doors closing around Tesla. Investors left. Colleagues called him strange. But Nikola did not argue. He simply kept working. Sometimes he stood by the window, looking at the flickering lights of New York and whispering, I gave them light. Now let's see what they do with it. He spoke less and less about the intelligent signals. The signal had disappeared, or rather, it had become quieter, as if the observers had stopped speaking. A short note appeared in his diary. They no longer respond. That means now we must respond. The military came to his laboratory. They asked for blueprints. Sometimes they offered enormous sums of money. He refused. You don't understand, he said. This energy was not created for destruction. But you discovered it yourself, they argued. I didn't discover it. I simply heard it. When one day he learned that his formulas were being used to develop weapons, he sat in the dark for a long time. No instruments, no light. They warned me, he said quietly to himself. Light is a mirror. It only reflects who we are. That night he turned on the receiver again. Silence. Then a barely perceptible impulse. Short, long, short. The same rhythm. He smiled. I knew you hadn't gone. And in that moment he understood. They do not interfere because they must give us the right to choose. The next morning he wrote his final public statement. I believe that humanity is capable of mastering energy without fear. But to do so, we must first learn to master ourselves. The newspapers ignored those words, and he withdrew further into himself. People often saw him in the park, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. It seemed he was talking to them. They understand, he said, smiling. They hear the silence better than people do. Mark Twain died, and after that Tesla closed himself off completely. But there was no madness in his eyes, only fatigue and calm. In one of his last letters he wrote, Light does not betray. It simply waits until we are worthy to look into it. When war began, they called for him again, to consult, to create. He refused. I will not work for darkness, he said. Scientists laughed, but decades later, the same principles he had discovered would form the basis of technologies capable of destroying cities. In those days, he understood that the test had begun, not for him, for everyone. In the laboratory, he turned on a weak current, and the lamps glowed, as if responding to a thought. "I gave them light," he said quietly. "Now let them decide who they want to be." New York, January 1943. The world was burning with war, and in room 3327 of the New Yorker hotel lived the man who once wanted to light up the planet. Nikola Tesla, grey-haired, thin, in an old coat and gloves. He never turned on the heat, saying that warmth interfered with thinking. On the table, several notebooks, a glass of water, a photograph of a pigeon, and a lamp unplugged from the outlet. He rarely left his room. He said he was listening to silence. Neighbors joked, "He's probably talking to the current." But one night a soft crackling sound came from his room, as if someone had turned on electricity without wires. They say he said then, "You have returned." He no longer sought answers. He knew the contact had never ended. It had merely grown quieter. The light was now within him. Sometimes he wrote short notes. "We are rays of one source. When fear disappears, there is no distance between us." In his last months, he thought much about humanity, about how the light he had given had become both a weapon and a hope. He blamed no one. He simply looked out the window, at the lights of the night city, and said, "Everything is as it should be." Sometimes the maid would come in. Later, she said, sometimes he sat with his eyes closed, and the air around him seemed to glow. I don't know where that light came from. The lamps were off. In his final letter he wrote, "I am not afraid. I have seen that death is not the end, but a return to the light from which all began." He died peacefully, sitting in a chair with a faint smile, like a man who had finished his most important work. When the police entered the room, all the clocks had stopped at the same time. 2:37 a.m. The report stated, "Unknown illumination, possibly reflection from a window." But the window was covered with curtains. The FBI took all his papers. Some disappeared forever. Some were classified. But among the notes they found a phrase that later became legend. "Energy is a form of consciousness. When man learns to think without fear, he will hear the universe." Decades passed. Neon signs lit the streets. Radio waves filled the air. The world became connected by invisible threads, just as he had once seen in his visions. Some would call it coincidence, others a fulfilled prophecy. Everything he had foretold came true: energy without wires, communication without borders, and people united by the light. They themselves had created. But along with it came what he had warned about: dependence, greed, control. Humanity is still taking its test. Sometimes engineers working with electricity say they hear a strange crackling, as if someone were whispering from deep within the wire. They smile and say, "It's just interference." But some still listen more carefully. Maybe it's just the sound of energy, or maybe a reminder of the man who was the first to hear the light and left behind a question. We are still answering today. What will you do with the light that has been given to you? What do you think? Did Tesla really hear something beyond our world? Or was it only the echo of his own genius? Tell us in the comments what you believe. Maybe your answer is what the light has been waiting for all along.